Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at an article from The Independent out of the UK. Now it says it was published a day ago, which, I mean, it's after midnight here on the 27th, so basically it's Thursday morning, just barely into it. So I don't know if this was Wednesday or Tuesday, but it's within a day. The reason why I'm covering this article is, and I've mentioned it before in some of my videos, I've studied history. I have a degree in it. And this one caught my attention. I wanted to take a look at it and see what they're talking about here. Because the Portuguese were part of the slave trade, and I was just curious what exactly it was. And when I saw the title, but then I saw the subtitle here, which we'll talk about in a second, and I went, huh. Something's not right. So I started reading the article and I went, yeah, I do have to do a video on this one. So the title here, 400-year-old colonial slave ship discovered washed up on Portuguese coast. This is the subtitle here, or the sentence here, the hook sentence that they put here under the title, is a dead giveaway that they're talking out of their ass. This ship was found with well-preserved treasures, including Chinese ceramics and spices. Slave ships didn't carry those things. Trade ships did. So this was a trade ship. But see, the Independent here, because they have to push their revisionist history, evil white people, white Europeans, bad. British slave trade, bad. All right, Britain, the root of all evil. See, they could have went with like another thing, even though it was the Portuguese that like had this ship filled with these things because of where it came from. But no, they chose to rewrite history and portray this as a situation where this was a slave ship. Clearly wasn't, though. So let's get into the article here. I wish the hack that wrote it would, put their name to it, because they are a hack. Archaeologists searching Portugal's coast have found a 400-year-old shipwreck believed to have sunk near Lisbon after returning from India laden with spices, specialists said. Okay, so that right there means it's a trade ship, because India was a big center of trade at one time. Okay, for things, especially spices. Now, with that being the fact, of course they are going to be, if they're a trade ship, bringing spices. Now, India also had a trade relationship with China, which is where the Chinese ceramics come from, which was probably like actual China, like something you might see on the Antiques Roadshow. I don't know. But, yeah, so you're talking antiquities on the note of China, stuff that you would actually probably see if someone had it in their family for generations or whatever, something that would probably end up with the UK being what it is and Portugal being what it is. If the Antiques Roadshow went there, you might see something like that. Total side note, but let's just get back on track here. Because that type of China was big trade. Let me say that before we actually get back on track, because I have the context in my head and you might not. Because between direct trade with China and trade through intermediaries like India, okay, Chinese ceramics were big business. Western Europeans, even Eastern Europeans, okay, wanted Chinese ceramics. So that's why I'm saying that this would probably have ended up, you never know, something similar to what was on the ship ended up on the Antiques Roadshow for argumentative sake. From a heritage perspective, this is the discovery of the decade. Project director Jorge Ferreira, I'm butchering that, said. In Portugal, this is the most important find of all time. Yes, and the Independent is actually trying to take it and make it sound like these particular finds were that of a slave trade ship. And they are so sleazy and dishonest with how they do it, it's not even funny. It's pretty bad. And I'm just trying to collect myself before we get into the next paragraph here, because here's where they get sleazy and dishonest. And this is why I wish the person had signed their name to this shit. In and around the shipwreck, 40 feet below the surface, divers found spices, 9 bronze cannons engraved with Portuguese coat of arms, Chinese ceramics, and cowrie shells, a type of currency used to trade slaves during the colonial era. Cowrie shells were a form of currency used by multiple groups. Okay, India was one of them. There was no slave trade going on in India. India had their own form of slavery going on with indentured servitude and the caste system. All right? They didn't want to give that up to outsiders? You kidding me? They weren't handing off their fellow Indians. No, they were enslaving them themselves. This was about trade. This was a trade ship. Cowrie shells were used in Africa as currency before the slave trade happened, which I love how you try to make it sound like this is a white man thing. The slave trade was started in Africa by Africans. They were slave trading each other, you know, warring tribes would conquer another tribe, and then they would sell the people that they had just beaten to a, you know, within an inch of their lives, you know, out there to other people, other tribes as slaves. Spoils of war. That's how it was seen. So don't try to make it like the whites created the African slave trade. That's a matter of historical fact that they didn't. And then don't try to play it like a trade ship that had cowrie shells, which were a currency, and a lot of different, you know, island nations used them. All right? India used them as a form of currency. African nations used them before the slave trade. It just so happens that as part of the slave trade, Europeans brought them there as a form of currency because they were wanted. They were already being used. But that wasn't where the whole cowrie shell thing primarily came from, because a lot of cultures used them. Not only were they considered, like say when they were trading with small island tribes, okay? One reason why these types of shells were sought after was for things like jewelry, because they're very shiny. I mean, they look like kind of ceramics themselves. That's one reason why they're sought after, is how shiny they are. So they were, by some, you know, tribes and such, I'm not talking on Africa, I'm talking about on islands and stuff, you know, out in the, you know, the ocean type thing. They would use them as, you know, for necklaces and other ornamental purposes, and they would use that as a way to trade with these people on the islands on that note. Okay, besides, you know, so it wasn't necessarily like, say, they used it as a currency, but they had a perceived value to them. And to try to portray this as, oh, well, cowrie shells are a thing from the slave trade, so therefore this is a slave trade ship, makes you people at the Independent look like dishonest, revisionist history scumbags. You really are. And I wish the sleazy piece of shit who wrote this article had signed it. But see, they knew they were being a dishonest scumbag, and they didn't want to put their name to it. So this is why I had to cover this in large part. This whole thing of misrepresenting history. Okay, this was not a slave ship. Oh, I'll portray it like that because, oh, Western Europeans, bad. You know, you don't look at the fact of what the British did in India, now do you, Independent? Huh. Kind of funny. People in glass houses. Found on 3rd of September off the coast of Cascais, I know I'm butchering that, a resort town on the outskirts of Lisbon. The shipwreck and its objects were well preserved, said Mr. Frere. I'm butchering that too. Along with his team, he believes the ship was wrecked between 1575 and 1625, when Portugal's spice trade with India was at its peak. Okay? Yes. So, spice trade. Trade ship. You're literally destroying your article with this right here. Yet you still ran it the way you did. That's really sleazy. In 1994, Portuguese ship Our Lady of the Martyrs was discovered near Fort of São Julio de Barra, a military defense complex near Cascais. Okay. Yeah, another ship was found there. I'm sure it was probably a trade ship. That was an area for the ships to be coming in with the trade. And the thing is India has been a big part of trade for centuries. That's another thing they want to leave out, because it was part of the Silk Road. So you had India dealing with a lot of trade as part of the, being part of the Silk Road itself, or having the Silk Road run through it. They dealt with China. Instead of Western Europeans going to, say, China themselves, over time, India was like, it's like the idea of, and this is going to be politically incorrect, and I really don't care. It's like the idea of a convenience store, okay? India was the convenience store when it came to the trade of say the 15, 16, even 1700s, even later, with like the Silk Road and things like that, and with China as an intermediary. So I mean, it wasn't like, it was like the idea of the historical equivalent of say, for a modern analogy, besides the convenience store, you've got them going, oh, thank you, come again. As they're selling shit and people are buying it and they're getting their shells that they want that aren't being traded as a means of buying slaves. So of course you're going to have nations like Portugal. I mean, Britain occupied them, Great Britain. And other nations, Western European nations, that have historically traded with them. So, I don't understand why they have to try to portray this the way that they are. They even cite the fact, which is why I got into this, brought this, was they're talking about a ship from 1994 that they found over there. So, again, it's another trade ship, but yet they're trying to push this false thing of slavery, and it's funny. For a long time, specialists have considered the mouth of the Tagus River a hotspot for shipwrecks, said Minister of Culture Luis Mendes. This discovery came to prove it. Yes, it also came to prove that Portugal had some trade ships going along, and that Lisbon was a center of trade. Okay, yeah, makes sense. But yet you'd still try, so something like this. This is another thing that kind of gets me. Historians have now had something confirmed. Okay, like on the note of these shipwrecks, that this is an area where they're going to probably have a lot of historical treasures to find. Things that we can use to find out more about our past. That would be something that you should probably talk about. But no, you decided to make this about my racism, you morons. The wreck was found as part of a 10-year-old archaeological project backed by the Municipal Council of Cascais, the Navy, the Portuguese government, and Nova University in Lisbon. Yeah, and you don't talk about their great discovery and what it means for the fact of what it could mean and what it does mean on the note of a historical context. You decided to turn it into an identity politics, cultural Marxist shit show. Good job. Anyway, I think I've covered this well enough. I mean, because This is ridiculous. I just wanted to show how they're going to take something that, to me, I find interesting. They found a trade ship, and they're trying to portray it as a slavery ship. So, I mean, I've covered my issues with this. I've pointed out their dishonest reporting. So, yeah, like I said, I'm just going to leave things here. If you liked this video, depending on where you are watching it, please give it an upvote or thumbs up. If you want to know when new content of mine hits the internet, don't forget to subscribe to one or more of my social media or video accounts listed here. Also, with YouTube, don't forget to ring that bell. You can find all of my video content on both BitChute and YouTube. This may not be the case with other places I upload to, but I will try to minimize this happening. You are always welcome to interact with me at any of these sites on the list, so feel free to do so. If you have anything you want me to cover in a video, when it comes to news or current events, send it right along to me. I will try to do my best to cover it. As always, thank you for watching.